Good morning, everyone. I'm Connie Siemens. This is Liz Sappenfield. We are co-chairing the Sacred Spaces Committee. We've been working on this for quite some time, and we're really excited to catch you up on what we've been doing for the last year and a half. There we go. We've got a variety of people on our committee. We've had some committee members come and go as they've entered and left the parish for various reasons. But we've had a nice representation between with clergy as well as various members with various areas of expertise in our community. A quick recap, we did this at the annual meeting, but where we began, if you may remember, it was raining in the church a couple of years ago, and we decided it was time to do some long neglected and many times deferred maintenance projects, including putting on a new roof. So we realized we had a lot more to do than just a roof. We needed to look at structural repairs. We needed to look at the stonework on the exterior of the building, protecting the stained glass windows, plumbing, mechanical, plaster, paint, technology, lighting. The list went on, and we realized that we weren't going to be able to do that at the same time that we did the roof. So we did an acoustical study as well. So we did a quick estimate or a quick kind of discernment on where we began, and we were looking at almost a $2 million project and a lot of complexity because the hip bone's connected to the thigh bone, which is connected to the knee bone. And so we decided to narrow it down and take care of the immediate problem, which was the roof. And we got it done. It was a group effort, getting everything out of the church, getting the organ wrapped, and getting everything back in the church. We all worshiped here for a couple of months during the summer, and I think it was a good experience for everyone. A little traumatic at first, but I think we realized that we could all be together in this space temporarily and that it would be a wonderful thing. And then we got to go back into the church after just a few months. We did a little bit of initial asbestos abatement. That's, there we go. And so in 2024 and into 2025, we did a deep dive. We looked at the interior space really, really closely. What are the repairs that we needed? What kind of fixes do we need to put in place? How is the church actually functioning? And was it functioning well? We evaluated the space from a liturgical perspective, both how it's being used and how historically it's been used, how the Episcopal Church views liturgy, what were the important parts that we needed to consider, what were the sacred cows, so to speak, that couldn't be touched, and what kinds of things could be flexible. We spent a lot of time evaluating the intersection between preservation and renovation and restoration. We looked at the physical history of St. Philip's because the church didn't start the way it is now. And there's been a lot of changes over the years, subtle, some, bigger, others. We looked at the history of Gothic churches because we have a Gothic revival church. How did the Gothic revival architecture and sacred space change over time? And what were the liturgical drivers for some of those changes? We looked at comparable churches and their renovations. We conducted a very extensive acoustic study. Liz applied for a grant to further our work. We didn't get it. We have a lot of materials. Should we try to apply for a grant again? And then we worked with Clearscapes to look at various renovation designs. Okay. Oh, you got to accept somebody.
Glad people are joining us. Okay. So in the research we've done on the church, there are archives over at Duke University in the library. And that was a really fun few days digging through those dusty files. So we're going to go through a series of photographs showing how the church has changed over time. Originally, oh dear, that's fine. Let's go there. Originally, there was a wooden church in the same location. painted white. And when they built the stone church in about 1907, they moved the little wooden church to the rear and they used it as a Sunday school. So this is, I think, from a newspaper article, or we found this in the archives about 1907. And so I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see some key features. So this is before the stained glass windows were done, before the altar carvings and the reredos in the back. It looks to us like this altar rail is pretty plain without the added moldings on it, but you can see the pews are the same that we have now. Yeah, the step arrangement is the same, different gate here. Here's a lectern over here that seems very similar to the one we have now. And this is a big alcove space where the organ or piano probably originally was. And that space has been closed up now, as you'll see as we go on. So back to this wider view, we think at the very bottom in front of this pew, there's a shadow that is probably the broad step. And then here we are in the 1940s. We're going to zoom in again. So here you can see now we have stained glass windows, but the stained glass windows didn't come all at once. They came a few at a time as they raised money. We have the reredos carvings. We can't see the altar carving, but maybe it's there. Carvings in the altar rail. You have the pulpit here on the right and the brass lectern on the left. Here's an early version of an organ, and this alcove still exists here. Okay, and we think there's a credence table on the wall here behind this Christmas tree that is hard to see. Thanks. Okay, so here we are in 1952. This one's nice because it's a much wider view. And you can see that the baptismal font is over here in the chapel. And there's not a chapel altar. And this is the organ that we had at the time. These pipes are still there, but they're covered with screens. This arrangement is the same, but now the pulpit has moved. Here, let's zoom in a little again. Pulpit's moved to the left, and the lectern is on the right. Credence table in the back, no ombre still for the consecrated host. You have all these carvings here. And, familiar candelabra and things like that.
Baptismal font was there starting in 1907. That's just the first picture you can see it.
Right. So the baptismal font started over here. Yep. Here's a close-up of the chapel. The ladies' auxiliary had this amazing scrapbook in the archives with newspaper cutouts and pictures of teas and kids performing and pageants and things like that. It's really sweet.
Ice cream socials.
Yeah, ice cream social receipts, all sorts of things. So what I think is really, what's really interesting here is that the baptismal font is clearly raised up. It's shoulder height. So it's on it's on a platform of some kind. Yeah, there's still no altar here, and the furniture that we are all associate with the chapel is not here. And you can see here that these windows are still plain. So as the money was raised for windows, and if you notice the next time you're in the church, there are little memorial plaques in the bottom rows of each one of the stained glass windows. So here we are in the 70s, and you can see that we still have this as a side door. So originally, the step is still there on the outside. This was the side entrance. And then when the breezeway was built as a connector, they moved the door around the corner and installed the St. Philip's window. Here we are in the 80s. This is all very familiar. There's still not an ombre here. Yep, bishop's chair is over here. And here we are today. So you can see we have the pulpit here, we have the brass lectern and the baptismal font. And then now we have our ombre. And so sometime between here, where the altar is back against the wall, so this entire time, the altar has been touching the back wall of the church. And then it was brought forward. So who was here when the altar moved forward? Uh-huh. So Sue was telling us that the rector at the time, Tom Midget, this was one of his signature moves, is to bring that altar forward and turn around. So originally, the priest prepared the communion with his back to the congregation. And by moving the altar forward, he could stand behind it and prepare service facing the congregation. So when we made contact with a divinity student who was doing a PhD at Duke in specializing in church architecture and serving at St. Joseph's. His name is Lachlan, and he came and did 2 sessions with us and talked us through the evolution of church architecture and the liturgical and scriptural connections behind the changes. And so originally, there would have been a physical screen made of stone or wood, a rood screen, and all the celebration of the communion happened behind that, so that it was just very visible, vague, and magical to the population. And it was happening in another language, right? So it was happening in Latin. And then as the Reformation comes and there's this movement to bring the scripture to the people in a way that they can better understand, things are translated into the vernacular languages. So people now have a version of the Bible that they can read. And then years later, they start to celebrate the communion in the language of the people. And then, slowly the architecture in the church becomes more and more visible. The rood screens open up, they're less dense, so you can see through them. And then communion starts to happen in the same space as the people. So there is, over the centuries, a steady movement of making communion, the celebration of the communion, the scripture, more accessible to the people, closer. And so part of Tom Midget's move to bring the altar forward and turn around and face the people is that same thing, bringing the celebration of the Eucharist closer to the congregation so that they can see it and feel more participatory. So here we go. We have 2 people on the waiting.
So as we were getting ready to take a look at what we wanted to do with the interior of the church, we had some very specific design priorities that were based on our vision statement, worship being the first one. To enhance the liturgy, any changes we may or may want to do should enhance the liturgy. It should not compromise capacity. It should be historically appropriate, and it should be aesthetically pleasing. Our next tenet is love, of course. Inclusion is really important. And accessibility. The current setup for the church is very challenging to anybody who's got mobility issues. There are stairs, there are wires, there's wrinkled carpet, there's a long distance, there's a exiting through The sacristy with multiple, very kind of dense stairs. There are tight pews. We also wanted to make sure that we were thinking intergenerationally about how this church is used or could be used in a better way. And of course, like I said, accessibility and that multimodal accessibility. So not only physical movement through the church, but audio, visual, that kind of thing. And then, of course, action. Can we create a church that is true to its historic roots and feels like the same church, but might have a little bit more flexibility for use in the space? And can we enhance the way it functions? So we did a quick, well, it wasn't quick, but I'll just go over this really quickly. we looked at a lot of photos and we did some site visits and we looked at other Episcopal churches and looked at how they were organized, how the sacred spaces were laid out, how the architecture reflected worship and reflected the experience. And we were all over the place: New York City, Richmond, Virginia, Southern Pines, in Maryland, California. We did a lot of internet research. And then like I said, we did some site visits. Here's St. John's in Morristown, Pennsylvania. When they renovated their church, their design priority was community engagement. And you can see there's the flamenco dancer here in their church. So they could move from liturgy to a cultural experience to bring people into the church. So it was a more active, engaging space. I think their enrollment or their attendance was down and their membership was down. And through this program, they actually started to grow and to become a little bit more sustainable. We have got a picture from St. Paul's Mannheim. This church on the lower right, St. John's in Reisterstown, that was one of the first Episcopal churches in the country. It's very, very old. And they did a beautiful renovation there. It's also very, very small. It's not much bigger than our chapel. Okay. So here's our existing floor plan. Our maximum capacity, if you're on a high holy day or a large funeral wedding where you're kind of sitting shoulder to shoulder, we can get about 313 people in it. On an average Sunday capacity seating with a 20-inch kind of distance between folks is 269. You can see we've made a few changes here already. You can see in the gray at the back of the chapel and the back of the front section. So those are flexible seating spaces. Those are chairs. And you can see the sacristy, and this is kind of where we are now. And you can't quite see it, but to the left of the pulpit, you can, it's sort of shadowed, but those are all the risers. Very complex and oddly shaped set of risers for using that altar space. It is treacherous. I don't know if you've ever read at one of those services or been on the Altar Guild, but and I can't imagine being an investment trying to navigate those stairs in those very tight spaces. Okay, next slide. Our proposed seating plan, and this is not written in stone, this is a general concept. We can work on this as we go along. But our goal was to not compromise capacity. And in fact, we've actually gained a few seats here, but to create a lot more flexibility. So we are removing pews in the chapel altar and replacing those with chairs. They can face forward, they could face to the center, they could be in the round, they could be removed for a children's program. And we're integrating seat capacities throughout the church so that people who are coming to worship who may have a walker, a cane, a wheelchair, they're not relegated to the back rows all by themselves all the time. Oh, and we have removed the first pew, and we have still gained seats. And we can put chairs. You can see we've got some chairs there now, but we can remove that pew and make a lot of room for musicians, for the pageant, for other kinds of programming. Okay. And here's our proposal for the chancel. It looks a little different. We would like to put the choir in the back, and so they can face the congregation and they can project forward. Lewis and the choir are very keen on this. He was definitely part of this discernment. The organ moves from the side, the organ console, to in front of the choir. You have the altar still on a riser, but much, much closer, and the rail comes forward. So there are no stairs. There's nothing to cross over or to climb up to get to communion. You don't have to exit through the sacristy, so there'll be much better flow. And we are returning the baptismal font to the chapel altar. Rather than put it on a big riser or platform like it was originally, we would like to have it on some sort of movable base. So we could have a baptism in the chapel, we could roll it all the way in front of the rail, it could be front and center. It could be moved to the back. It can make room, we can make room for all kinds of things in that space. We could also, the altar is still there, we could roll it to one side or the other to make room for a chapel service. We have moved the pulpit back to the right side. In this format, it's behind the rail. And we did that for visual balance because on the left side, we've got that big organ console, and we've got a lot of things lumped onto the left side of the chancel right now. And we'll have the lectern then moves to the left, which is that little square there. If we can get the right technology involved, there will no longer be mics and strings attached to that. So that also can be moved and placed where we need it to be placed. And you can see over to the far right on the sacristy, we've got where there is a closet now where the organ master used to sit is an accessible bathroom. And what is the verger sacristy, where people walk through to exit communion now, will be a storage area. We'll probably put the technology there. The vergers can will still have a view from the door to the altar, so they can keep track of what's going on in the service. But we can roll a piano in and out of there, so the piano doesn't have to stay on the floor. We will have locked cabinetry for things that need to be secured, and nobody has to walk through that space, right? So that becomes a secure space. Vesting will move here to the church, to the parish hall. And the side door here out of the sacristy will become a second accessible entrance. So there will be some landscaping and some ground leveling that'll have to happen outside. We need new HVAC. We would relocate those units so that we would have a clear path from the parking lot into the side of the church. Am I missing anything, Liz? Yes. Yes, there is. That's that little white thing there. Yes, that chapel altar, if you were to move it away from the wall, you would see a large gaping hole with all the innards of the organ. So it is up there for a reason. But we could, in the St. John's Reisterstown Church, they have their primary altar in the back of the church, where they have their cross and their flowers, and they have some of the sacraments, and they have a rolling small altar that they bring to the front to their broad step, and they bring the communion down to that broad step. It is possible we could work something like that in the chapel, particularly if the baptismal font can be moved. Yeah. And so communion here, you'd come up through the center, you go to the rail, and then you'd circle back through the chapel altar. So you'll have a nice circular flow, and hopefully people can stay out of each other's way a little better. Lori? They're still here. You see this long tan row of cabinetry. There'll still be a sink. I mean, basically those cabinets stay, and we'll actually probably add, well, maybe add a few from the verger sacristy. But this is a much longer set of cabinets. So it will be an entrance. It will also be back of house still, but they can close. So we figured that should work pretty well. And then anything really valuable would go into that back room where the verger sacristy is now. So that would be the locked closet back there. What else? Choir can move. They can be in chairs. They can be on risers. They can face them. They can face forward. They could be in the round. You can have extra musicians back there. There's a lot of flexibility. And like I said, we've removed this front row, and we make it. It can be many things with chairs or available for various programming. Okay, next slide. Here is a rendering of what that might look like. We've removed the carpet, which is part of the acoustical study recommendation. You want the floor to mirror the ceiling. We'll zoom in. You'll see the pulpits on the right and the lecterns on the left, and you can see the chapel altar is still there with a baptismal font in front of it. There's a lot of wood. I think it's rather beautiful. And of course, the altar is forward. In this rendering, you can see Gabe. We're celebrating behind the altar. And you can see a few choir members in the back, just barely. And you can see the difference here with the organ pipes on the left, that big piece of hanging furniture, and the pulpit on the right. It feels more open. It feels a little more balanced. You can see some of the altar party on the left. So the altar party becomes more visible. The beautiful, I think one of the most lovely pieces of art in the church, which is the altar, is very visible. You can see the carving. It's really lovely. If you've not really contemplated it, next time you go to communion, you might take a moment and really look at it. And what I love most about this is it's a little bit different, but to me, it feels so much like the same. It feels like itself, but it provides better access, better visibility, more emphasis on liturgy. And it doesn't feel like we've done anything really radical. We are suggesting we remove the battleship gray. And so this is not a done deal exactly, but a color scheme, something like this. It makes the windows pop, and it provides, I think, a grander, more open, more inviting view into the chancel. Certain things will stay. The bishop's chair is still over here on the right. I'm gonna look at the next one. And here's a wide view again. And this time we have Marianne at the pulpit. You want to zoom in. And there you go. You can see the gospel book is up on the altar. It's very, very visible. And there we are. Any questions? Thoughts, comments, concerns?
Are the stones painted now?
They are painted now. A lot of paint. We've looked at the paint. We've done a careful evaluation. There's a lot of it. It's really, really well adhered. It's rock hard. And to remove the paint and take it back to the original granite would be a labor of love and quite expensive. It is not in our current plan because we would like to spend the money elsewhere.
So would there still be a contrasting color? It would be two different contrasting colors, just not as dark or gray as we currently have, correct?
Yes. So we have more of a creamy tan here that's more stone-like with the creamy plaster. Do you have a question?
Medieval church architects thought there was an advantage in having the differences of elevation so that people felt that they were ascending to God,
Mm-hmm.
and we're lacking that in this. I understand it. I mean, it's probably important for a lot of people, including myself, but something to consider.
The altar is raised on a platform. It is not at the broad step level. It is slightly higher, yet still. That's another thing that we can't really see from this design, but there is a platform underneath the altar. It's deeper, it's a little wider, so there's more room to navigate. The clergy would like a little more room because they're kind of doing this behind each other when they're up there. And we're also rebuilding the stairs to the pulpit, which are also quite treacherous in their current state. So we are looking at accessibility and functionality and safety, not only from a worshiping perspective, from the folks that are up there actually conducting the service.
Connie, explain about the blue.
Oh, yes. The blue, this was the architect's vision. I don't know if you've ever been in the church when the sun is shining really brightly and the stained glass actually reflects a little bit off the ceiling. That's what's happening there. We're not actually going to paint the ceiling blue.
Okay.
Well, I've always been curious about what condition the floor is in under all that carpet. Do we know? Do we think that the floor parts can be refinished, or is it shot?
So Randy's telling me the last time it was refinished was when they installed the organ, which, must be 30 years ago now, 25, something like that. We know that there are plywood sections and patches under the runner down the central aisle. And we are hoping that there might be some original flooring on the broad step level that could be salvaged to patch those places in the aisle. But until the carpet comes up, we won't really know.
Right.
Yeah, the big boxes that the altar, it's level. They're just they're not made of a lot. And they squeak.
Can we go back over the communion flow? There was a question from Zoom about just to review that.
So people would come up the central aisle to the rail at the broad step and stand or kneel there, and then come back around through the chapel. It is also possible to have a standing service here in the chapel. So like now, you could have Eucharistic ministers come over here to serve, and you could have the same two service areas, in which case you would go up the central aisle and then back down the central aisle. Yes.
Oh, so can I?
So there is no longer a communion rail in the chapel?
That's correct. So the chapel has come down to the floor level. The altar table may still be up on a level, but there's not a kneeling rail in the chapel.
Do you happen to have a picture of the side chapel chairs facing in? Like, because my understanding is we could turn some of those into.
We did not pay for a rendering of that.
Oh, okay.
Each one of these renderings is about $5,000.
Why?
We have a diagram. Yeah. Do you want to, if we could? Okay. There's somebody else in Zoom also, Sue. Anne.
It's.
I think I missed the part about accessibility from outside. Was there something about a side door? I didn't understand.
Yeah, so there's a door that leads into the sacristy. So this door here, that the parking lot's right here. Then this door currently has one step up, I think, or maybe two. But that could be an accessible entrance. There is an update to the building code that is currently processing its way through the regulatory system. And so we have been alerted to the fact that coming down the road, we will need to have 2 accessible entrances to every building. So we are, there's, the one over here in the chapel that's at ground level, and then this one could be a second accessible entrance. Yeah. Dan. Oh, can you hold on?
Oh, okay. For ground level, you're referring for handicapped people.
Yep,
So that they don't count the front entrance because it has steps.
that's correct. That's right. So there are currently mechanical units along the walkway there that will be relocated, probably back over here, where they're also less visible. Henry.
Is the choir, so the choir is going to be on ground level back at the back of the sanctuary there?
So this area is all at the level of the broad step. And then this is the altar platform, raised space for the altar. So the choir has the option of having risers or levels if they want to do that. We haven't gotten into the nitty gritty of the choir arrangements there.
Those might be something flexible that could be taken in and out.
Yeah.
And is there any plan for the votive station?
Yes. So the Mary and the prayer candles, we were thinking about bringing them over here into the chapel. And the healing altar can stay with the St. Philip's window. And if we need, on the rare occasion that we need that space for seating for Easter or Christmas Eve, it can temporarily move because we're not offering a healing prayer station at that same service. So the idea is that these pieces of furniture are all flexible and can go and come, and we will have a plan for where we're going to put them in the meantime, and then plan to move them back and all of that. Dan.
I believe I heard someone say there was actually increased capacity in the church now. What would the projected capacity be for parishioners?
Sue, can we go back a couple? So the question is about capacity. When we have, kind of moved the front, there we go. Front pew comes out, we have increased accessible spots. So on a 329 on a high holiday.
That max capacity also involves temporarily moving the healing altar and putting chairs there as well.
Okay, Amanda has a question about what's the logic behind moving the baptismal font and removing the chapel side rail?
Mm-hmm. We are going back to the original design, and we are creating more flexibility. Yeah, we'll go for it. Having the baptismal font where it is a problem for accessibility, right? It's right smack dab in the middle of the primary ground level entrance. It's an object that is often difficult to move around. So as we were thinking about how we would want to address that, it seemed like a reasonable plan and a good idea and a precedent to have it back in the front of the church where it's also more visible. And by making it movable, right, we could, it doesn't even have to stay there. It can be moved for special services. It could be brought even more front and center.
So there was a lot of discussion in the committee about the fact that there's a tradition that the baptismal font is near a doorway because people who are being baptized are entering into the church communion. So that's part of our desire to make it movable if you wanted to have that symbolism incorporated into the baptism service.
How hard would it be to put a communion rail in the chapel? The Wednesday evening service, everybody kneels for communion. They choose and prefer that, and I would really miss that.
I mean, we can certainly look into a movable rail. It seems like that existing rail, we might be able to do that. And the service may actually could also change locations, right? And that service could be at the Broad Step. We know at the 8 o'clock service, half of the 8 o'clockers are sitting already in the main part of the church. So maybe we just move that service. And it is a change from the way it's been recently, but it's not a significant change from the way it was originally. There are compromises with any plan, and there are some compromises here.
What was the thinking in putting the organ console right in the middle there?
Lewis wanted to have better visibility so he can conduct the choir. The organ console is also movable. It could be wheeled into the sacristy. The piano could come out. It could move off to the side. It's got a lot of flexibility. One more question from Donna, and then and then Dan, and then we'll advance to the next slide because we're getting close to the end here.
I have a question and a short remembrance of a previous conversation about this very topic. I'll give you the remembrance first. Jeff and I came here in 1995. We were newly married, 1996. Went to our first annual meeting, and we had decided to come to St. Philip's after visiting every Episcopal church. And we had this conversation, and there was a lot of over my dead body, will we move the pews? And this is the exact thing that we talked about. And it's really cool 30 years later to be having the same conversation without a little less over my dead body. And people actually followed us out of the church. I'm not sure if it was Dan. It was either Dan or it was Ed Embry. Okay, said we're really not like this, and please stay. And so we have stayed for 30 years. So I just wanted to offer that we can get through this regardless of how we all feel about it. I feel good that we're making changes. I also want to offer like we move the altar here, like we could have a rail for the chapel that is removable and movable back in. I also really want to challenge us on getting the right kind of chairs that befit the space and aren't, we want them to be flexible. We don't want them to be heavy, but at the same time, they really do need to fit the space. So I know those are details we haven't gotten to. So I just wanted to offer that, flexibility is awesome. And I think we can still do both things. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Donna. I agree. Like I said, the exact floor plan has not been 100% determined. We will need to work with a carpenter to assess whether we can trim down pews, or maybe want to take some of the chapel pews and move them into the main part of the altar to free that up. Anyway, those are all details that we haven't gotten sorted out at this point in time. Dan?
With regard to the flow of folks coming to take communion at the main altar, is the proposed way they would come up, they would fill the altar rail, and then leave back through the chapel, so the people on the right-hand side kind of cut back across the flow of people coming to the rail to return
Yes.
to their seats. Okay.
And it's kind of what we have to do now. There's no perfect circular flow given the fact that we only have one side aisle. If we had two side aisles, it would be different. And we actually looked at trying to put a side aisle. We looked at various floor plans. They weren't great, and it really reduced our capacity. Sue, can we advance?
What,
We do. We have got one more thing, and we can answer more questions later on, but we do have some really important things, right, to review. So you saw this slide before. What remains is a whole lot of details, and we're not going to review that. I just want you to know that the changes, right, they may seem big, but there's a lot of granular detail, and it touches on so many things. So, right, so the remainder is extensive. We need a master plan to figure out how to break down this work, and hopefully into reasonable phases, more than one phase. But as I said before, the hip bone's connected to the thigh bone, connected to the knee bone, and when you're pulling up the floor, you should be working underneath, and is that the time to do the technology? And the list kind of goes on and on. So we need to be really careful and thoughtful about that. And we need a comprehensive estimate of the budget. It's in the millions with an S. For sure, to do everything, right? I mean, you're talking about new HVAC, a new electrical panel, which is not a renovation. That's that's a repair. The panel is really old, and the HVAC systems are old. It involves all the acoustical changes we want to do. So what we're recommending is, if the roof was phase one, that phase two would be plaster and paint. If you've noticed, the plaster work in the church is degrading rapidly because once that plaster is exposed, it starts to crumble and it will only get worse. We know if in order to accomplish this whole plan, we're years out and the walls really can't wait years for that repair. So what we would like to do is get that done right away this summer, if at all possible. We hope that by making that worship space a little bit more beautiful immediately, we can all take a lot of comfort from that and hopefully get excited about the other work ahead. And that other work ahead, there'll be lots of time to sort out those details, have more input, hopefully get these launched into discrete phases, because it's going to take a little while for us to get the money. Next slide. But to do what we want to do this summer, right? Whoops. We've got to move pews. We have to store some. There's a lot of protection and cleanup work that has to be done. We have to re-protect the organ again. We'll need scaffolding. There's going to be extensive plaster repair, the paint, developing that master plan with clearscapes and involving a little bit more engineering assessment and project management. We're looking at about $176,000, and that includes a little bit of an overrun, which is a big number, but it's really actually not that big. We were able to raise $675,000 a couple of summers ago to get the roof on. So we are hoping that we can, through the generosity of people, both large and small, quickly come up with $175,000 to get this next work completed and a plan for the future, one that we can organize a capital campaign on, one we can look forward to, and hopefully create ultimately a really beautiful space that we can be proud of and like to worship in. So, how can you get involved? You can donate. You can volunteer to help prepare the church for the move in and out. And if you want, you can join our planning committee. Yeah. Oh, the donations can start right now. There's a QR code. There's also on the website, if you go to the pledge page or the donate now page, there's a drop-down selection for this work too.
Sure. Oh, thank you.
There we go.
A quick question. Oh, go ahead. That should really be publicized. Yeah.
We will. We needed to present it first.
With regard to the paint, does the first list include removal of layers on the stonework, or would that be a separate estimate?
No, this phase would not remove the paint on the stonework. We would change the color. If it's something we felt really strongly about from a design aesthetic to take it back to the granite, that would have to be integrated into a future plan. It's very expensive, labor-intensive work. Dan?
Some of us are not as technically advanced as others. I would find it very helpful if a few of these slides could be turned into bulletin boards. It could be posted around the parish hall.
We can do that for sure. We'd be happy to do that. All right, well, it's almost time for church. Feel free to contact us at any time. We would love to help. We would love your input, and thank you very much for your time and attention.